Stress is really when there are too many demands in the environment, whereas anxiety is our kind of natural biological response to threats in the environment. So anxiety is about anticipating threats and then responding in a way that's going to help protect us against those threats.
Do you ever feel like worry just take over, keeping you awake at night, feeling anxiety, and draining your energy? For many of us living with bipolarity, managing stress and sleep can make or break our stability. Welcome to Bipolar Talk, the podcast where we turn our bipolarity into an opportunity. I'm Clément Bessat, the founder of Upstage. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lillian Nejad, clinical psychologist, author, and founder of Contain Your Brain, an innovative app and resources app designing to help people reduce worry, stress, and insomnia. Lillian, can you present yourself?
Well, hello. Thank you so much, Clément, for that introduction. As you said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working for 25 years based in Melbourne, Australia. American by birth, though, as you can probably tell from my accent. My career has been in many settings. So I've worked in public mental health across various teams, including inpatient psychiatric teams, crisis and assessment teams, and continuing care, and the whole range. And I've worked as a university lecturer, training other clinical psychologists. And then I've also worked within organizations and also in my own private practice. And I guess throughout my career, I have seen a lot of gaps in products and services to, in every setting. So even settings where you would think, they've been around for 100 years, they should have things sorted out by now, like hospitals, for instance. They don't. And there's a lot of gaps, especially in taking care of people's psychological health and well-being. And so I just started creating things to fill those gaps, I think, in kind of every setting that I was in. And when I went into private practice and started working for myself, I just thought, well, why not take all of the different resources that I've created over 20 years and offer and make them more accessible to the general public? Because I'm sure you know, and your listeners know, that not everyone sees a psychologist. Even if it's warranted, a lot of people don't make it to a psychologist. And it's not really fair for only the people who front up to a psychology session to know the strategies that could potentially help them with a variety of issues, whether that's sleep or stress or anxiety or bipolar disorder or whatever it is. So I just started to develop some tools to make those kinds of strategies more accessible. And that, is the whole range, books, handouts, articles, online programs. And then what you mentioned in your introduction, the most recent one is the Contain Your Brain app, which is essentially an app that helps people worry less so they can focus more and sleep better and reduce stress and live more, because worry does, when we get overtaken by our thoughts, we can't focus during the day and we can't sleep at night, and it really affects our quality of life. I felt that the strategies associated with worry were not very well known and also not particularly practical in the format that they had originally been derived from, which was back in the early 80s when life was very different. And so I thought, if we just created an app environment where it made it really practical and private and easy to do these really effective strategies, and more people would, one, know about it and to do with them and hopefully worry less and live more.
Yeah. And I feel stress and worrying for us as bipolar is probably one of the main concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have stress. I do have worry. I'm like you if you're listening. And those moments you don't know what to do. And sometimes I take pills to sleep better, for example. But I know it's only a short-term thing. And at the end of the day, you have to find your way into how do you manage that and how do you build strategy to do it. And can you tell us about those strategies? And maybe I think let's first describe what is stress and why we're stressed, I feel let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, well, I think that's really a helpful place to start. There's often the words stress and anxiety are used interchangeably, and they aren't the same. They are related, and the reason why they're confused is because the symptoms are all pretty much the same. But stress is really when there are too many demands in the environment, and it leads to this feeling of overwhelm when we can't meet those demands. Whereas anxiety is our kind of natural biological response to threats in the environment. So anxiety is about anticipating threats and then responding in a way that's going to help protect us against those threats. And usually that's through the fight or flight or freeze response. So we either run away from threats or we fight them, or we might just stay still until the threat is gone. And so that's really the difference. The symptoms, though, are very similar. When we feel stressed and overwhelmed or anxious, we have similar physiological responses. We might have tense muscles, headaches, upset stomachs, and then our feelings are very similar. A stressed person can often feel very anxious that they're not going to meet all the demands, or they might, anxious people feel very nervous and overwhelmed as well. So there's certainly overlap. And then cognitively, there's overlap too, because people who are stressed or anxious will have more worries. And, worry is really our thoughts expression of anxiety, because worry is really there, again, just like anxiety is, to help us detect threat and then to think about how we can protect ourselves or prepare or plan so that we stay safe. And so I guess the other thing that I think is really important is that we don't think about stress and anxiety and worry as necessarily negative things or states, because we actually do need to experience stress, anxiety, and worry in functional ways to stay motivated and stay safe. And so they can be very functional ways of being, but everything functional can be dysfunctional. And often when people are talking about their experiences of stress or anxiety, they're talking about dysfunctional stress and anxiety. And the difference, I would say, between the two are, well, functional is when it's working for you. So when you feel anxious, for instance, and it's signaling a real threat, and then you protect yourself from that threat, then it's working for you. That's exactly what it should be doing. So it might not be a pleasant state. It might be very uncomfortable, but it's working for you. So it's functional. Whereas dysfunctional worry or anxiety is when it comes up when there isn't a real threat, or it's coming up too intensely, so you can't effectively respond to the situation or the circumstance, or when it's happening too frequently or lasting too long and having a really negative impact on your quality of life in a variety of areas, whether that's home or work or school or your relationships. So that's kind of the difference. And what we want to assist with Contain Your Brain is that dysfunctional side, managing your worries, understanding which worries are actually working for you and which are not, and then knowing how to create boundaries for these thoughts so that they're not interfering with your whole day and taking your focus away from what you really want to be focusing on, and not interfering with your sleep at night. Because you mentioned, it's that sleep is an area that people can struggle with. And I think it is kind of the number one thing that I hear among the people around me, not just my clients, but just my colleagues and business owners and, professionals and kind of everybody. Sleep is an issue. And people tend to naturally try to go for the quick fixes or like marketing ploys. So it's either, what you said, like it's really easy to take medicine for that, but you're not really solving the problem, or you might get pulled in by, something online, like try blue light glasses, for instance, that will help you with your sleep. And that could potentially help you. But what I'm finding with a lot of people is, or what I'm hearing from them is that the thing that's getting in the way of sleep is not light. It's thoughts. They can't stop their thoughts before bed, or they're waking up in the middle of the night with racing thoughts and they can't get back to sleep. Those are the most common reasons why people have disturbed sleep or insomnia. So if you're going to help yourself, then you need to target the actual issue. And hopefully, one of the tools that will help people is the Contain Your Brain app. Because that's really what it's helping you to do, is to worry less and also worry more effectively by addressing your problems at times that are convenient for you.
Yeah, that's always the same thing as like how do you go back to the roots of your problem
Mhm.
instead of like trying to find the thing on top of it.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that it's even sleep at least is one of the root problem, but if you have too much anxiety, then you cannot sleep. If you cannot sleep, then you have headache, then you have work problem, couple problem, whatever.
Yeah, it's a whole cycle. It's very hard, once you're in the cycle, it's hard to know where to intervene on that cycle. And the truth is you can intervene at lots of places on the cycle. And, worry is just one of those ways. Has been shown to be a really effective way as well.
Yeah, maybe we can go a little bit deeper into that. So, for example, to talk a little bit about myself, I really like journaling. So I do the 5 minute journaling, gratitude, this type of thing.
Great.
I try to write a lot, of course, talk a lot. But yeah, I'm still anxious. I still have issue, I guess, with stress. And what would you like to tell me and the people listening who are struggling? Tips would you like to give us?
Hmm. Well, I think if we're talking about reducing stress in general, there's so many things that we can do. So there's things that calm the body and things that calm the mind. I think that those are kind of two really good, easy ways of thinking about it. So some of the things that I suggest to my clients to calm the body are relaxation exercises, for instance, like progressive muscle relaxation. Is that something that you're familiar with, Clement? So, yeah, no?
No, 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 go for it. I'm curious.
So, progressive muscle relaxation is a relaxation exercise that involves systematically tensing and then relaxing different muscle groups in your body. So, you usually go through um, from head to toe or from toe to head. And it's often guided. So, like, you might listen to somebody guiding you through tensing different areas of your body. And the idea is that tension and relaxation are incompatible. And it's really helpful for you as a person to understand and be able to feel and sense when you are tense and when you are relaxed. And by practicing this on a regular basis, you can actually reduce your baseline level of stress. So, if you reduce your baseline level of stress, then when you are in situations where you might experience overwhelm or anxiety, that it affects you, like, of course, it will affect you still, but it might not affect you at the same level of intensity because your baseline is lower. And you can also use progressive muscle relaxation just before bed as well. So, for instance, I actually record a lot of mindfulness and relaxation exercises. That was one of the things that came out of just creating things for my clients when they didn't really exist back. Like, I'm talking about like late '80s when, internet wasn't a thing really. And you could just maybe find some recordings, but they weren't very good, or the music was bad, or the quality was bad. And I used to just record myself on tapes and give them to my clients, and then eventually record it on a CD. And now I just record for Spotify and things like that. But the most popular recording that I have done is called Progressive Muscle Relaxation for Sleep. And I think I've had over 150,000 people listen or stream that recording. And that just shows how much sleep is an issue at the moment. But it also shows that this is a particularly effective strategy that people find really helpful. So if you've never tried progressive muscle relaxation, I would recommend that. And the guidelines to start with that are ideally to do it 2 times a day for 1 or 2 weeks, and then 1 time a day, and then gradually what happens is you don't need to do the exercise because what it feels like to be tense and what it feels like to be relaxed. So you can eventually just say relax, and your body will just naturally go into a relaxation state. So this is the type of strategy that you start off doing it intensely to kind of develop that muscle memory even, and then over time you it just takes a few seconds. And so yeah, super helpful. And then so that would be my number one for the body. But I want to say that a lot of people prefer more active methods to reduce stress. And so relaxation exercises wouldn't be something that they would potentially want to do because they prefer to be more active. And active things are really helpful for stress too. So if you prefer to be more active and you feel like intensely stressed or anxious in the moment, what can be really helpful is to just do like 5 minutes of intense cardio, not be running in place or doing jumping jacks or just skipping rope or something like that for 5 minutes. Because, when we feel anxious, our body is actually gearing up to protect or fight protect yourself by like fighting or running away. So your limbs get all this kind of energy. And if it's not used, that's where you get that sense of restlessness from that just can make it feel worse rather than better. So you can actually relax that out or you can run it out. And so depending on who you are and what your preferences are, you can choose to do one or the other, or it might even be that you like to do both, but a circumstance might be better for one or the other. So I think those are really helpful. And along with the relaxation ones, breathing exercises are super helpful. So abdominal breathing can be a very quick and easy way of calming yourself down. And so abdominal breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and then kind of an intense 5-minute cardio workout are probably my top 3 calm your body tips. And then calming your mind tips. And this is kind of where Contain Your Brain is based on these kinds of tips. So one is called worry time. Is that something you're familiar with?
Actually, no. It's interesting because even the first concept, actually, I did it in yoga a lot.
Mhm.
When my yoga teacher actually do the breathing exercise from head to toe, and yeah, I don't do it since I arrived in Australia, and I miss that a lot. It really it was when I do my yoga, I remember at night it was my best night every time.
Quick break. Can you let us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform of your choice? It really helps us break the stigma around bipolarity. Let's get back to the episode.
Right. Isn't that funny? Like you already know what works for you, but sometimes we just don't do it. We forget.
Yeah, and new environment, haven't gotten into yoga class here. But it's good. You remind me to do it.
Yeah. Well, I invite you to try some of mine if you like. You can find it on Spotify. If you just put my name into Spotify, you can find my progressive muscle relaxation ones. There's one for during the day and there's one for before bed. And if you don't, and a lot of people don't like progressive muscle relax, not a lot, but there's going to be some people who don't really like that particular relaxation exercise. So there are a variety of other ones that can be really helpful too. So I've recorded a variety. So if people like my voice, then that might be a good option. But yeah, I think it's always really helpful to think, when you're not feeling so great, what worked in the past? When did I feel good? What was I doing? Um, and and then just do that, do it again. And sometimes that's all it is. Just remembering those strategies that worked before.
Yeah, and that's the thing, for us as bipolar is changing environment is something that we have to be really careful and that I have to be careful about it because I just moved from Paris to Sydney. And yeah, you are changing your routine and you tend to
Yeah.
forget what worked for you and what happened when you did it. And that's really interesting also to go back to those exercises and to be able to practice it whenever you want. That's cool. So field is really interesting with the body, but like, let's go back into the mind.
Yeah.
How can we help ourselves with that?
So there are a number of ways. So one of the ways is called worry time, which I mentioned before. And essentially what worry time is, it's a technique that helps you contain your worries and create boundaries for your worries by scheduling a time to worry. Rather than letting your thoughts take over, you set aside a time and a place to worry. And whenever you have a worry outside of that time, you just jot it down. I'll talk about the old school way of doing it because this is a strategy that was developed or discovered in the early 80s. And so the way that we used to teach it, again, I started my psychology career in the 90s. So the way that we used to teach it was whenever you had a worry outside of your worry time, you just wrote it down. So you wrote it down on like little pieces of paper, and then you would put it in a container like a jar or a box that was in your worry place. And you would choose a worry place, for instance, that was maybe a chair in your home, like not in your bedroom because we don't want to worry in our bedrooms, but like somewhere that was convenient that you could access every day. And you would put that, and then in your worry time. So once you put your worry in the box, it's contained until your worry time. And then when you reach your worry time, which let's say it's 5 p.m. every day, then you go to the box and you take the worries out and then you process them. That was the old school way of doing it. Now, the reason why that's not working for us so much anymore is because, well, our lives are completely different. We're much more mobile. We're also on our phones a lot more. And also, we're not writing stuff down on pieces of paper very much. And privacy is, um, very important to us. And I guess it always has been, but perhaps it wasn't something that we were really thinking about as much, 20 or 30 years ago. And so the Contain Your Brain app actually allows you to set that worry time in place and also to write down or voice in your worries when they occur outside of that time. So then it stores it for you in a really private and secure way. And then the idea is that when you get to your worry time, that you can address your worries effectively. And the way that you do that, we've kind of distilled 40 years of research into like a simple framework that people can follow. So the first step is really to categorize the type of worry it is. Is it something that is solvable, or is it unsolvable, or is it solved already? Because the research actually shows that a lot of the things that we worry about never happened. In fact, over 90% of our worries don't happen, or if they do happen, things go better than what you thought they would go. So your worry was really unnecessary anyway. So that's why we have that solved category. And depending on the category that you choose, then you get strategies that go with that category. So if it's solvable, and I don't think that we have that many issues with solvable problems because I think we just, if it's solvable, then we can work on finding a solution. So if you find that your worries are solvable, then you would spend your worry time working on possible solutions, going through that, brainstorming and picking one and then, reviewing it after you've tried it and, that kind of problem solving process. I think where people get really stuck is the unsolvable worries because we want to be able, I think it's human nature to want to fix things and find solutions for things. But sometimes the reality is that we don't have the power to solve everything. We might not be the people who are in control of a problem, for instance. Or if you have a problem with another person and they don't want to engage in a solution, then you can't solve that problem. Or it might be a problem that's a really big problem like climate change or political unrest that, it seems so overwhelming that you don't think that you can have an impact on that. So there's so many things that can be in the unsolvable realm. And I think that that's where we get stuck. Or, even this is one area, as well as when we're thinking about or worrying about things that have happened in the past. Well, we can't change the past. So we're stuck in this loop of like thinking through something, thinking that it's helping us, but what we're actually doing is just ruminating, and it's actually making us feel worse and more anxious or even more depressed. And so what we have done in the app is just match strategies that will help people with these kinds of unsolvable worries. And the types of strategies for that are, there's a few different ones. So one is acceptance strategies, because I mean, that's a really difficult thing to do, I think, is just to accept that you don't have the power to solve something. And it might be that you don't have the power to solve something today, but or you don't have the power to solve something by yourself. Or you just don't have the power to solve it at all, and it's just not solvable at all. So accepting that, though, and understanding how you can do that through, for instance, mindfulness skills or distress tolerance skills, can help us reduce the suffering that can come from not being able to solve a problem. But other strategies might be distraction, like how do you refocus your attention on something that's controllable or more helpful or more healthy. And other strategies might have to do with talking to someone about it and just getting outside support. And other strategies might even be, how do you break the big problem down into smaller bits so that you might see that there might be areas that you do have the power to do something about, and other areas that you don't. And then maybe that will feel better, that you can put that in the solvable section instead of the unsolvable section. So, yeah, so that's kind of essentially what it is. It's setting a time and place, adding your worries when they occur outside of that time, and then in your worry time, addressing your problems effectively. And there's a whole range of reasons why worry time works. And yeah, I can go through that too if you like.
Well, I was taking some note, and I feel one of the things which is pretty difficult is like whenever you have worry or anxiety, you usually want to not do it, not take care of it, and you want to postpone. And in terms of, for us, it can then transform into something worse. Could be a depression. And it's just a vicious circle. And it's like, how do you break that? I understand worry time, I think is really interesting, but do you do it every day? And what happens if you don't do it?
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things. It's helpful to create a habit of worry time initially, just like we talked about with progressive muscle relaxation. If you start off doing it every day, for instance, then over time you might not need it every day. But at the beginning, it's really a way of you understanding how to gain some control over your mind. And so, what the suggestion would be then is to set ideally the same time every day, and then practice writing down your worries. Or, and again, you can do it the old school way if you're more, like some people like to write down on pieces of paper. That, I mean, if you prefer that, I would, suggest that you do it that way. And if you prefer using a mobile app, then use that way. There's lots of different methods. But yeah, and then when you write the worries in, you just have to remind yourself that you will address it. I think what happens with worry is we either just get completely distracted by what's going on in our head. And we never really get to a resolution. We just keep thinking the same things over and over. Or like what you said, we just try to stop it or avoid it or deny it or squash it. And the thing is that what the research shows is when we try to suppress our thoughts, they actually, even if they initially are suppressed and you're able to suppress them for a short term period, what ends up happening is that there's a rebound effect, and they can actually come at you even more intensely than before. So trying to stop your worries is not effective. What is effective is postponing it or delaying it to a time where it makes sense to solve your problems. So it doesn't really make sense if you're, let's say, working to start worrying about something that isn't work related. But if you had like a worry time already set and you could just jot it down and say, like, okay, it's not a good time now, but I'm going to take you serious. I'm taking you seriously. I'm writing it down and I've made an appointment for you. And I'm gonna think about you at 5 after work. And from 5 to 5:30, you wouldn't want worry time to be really any longer than half an hour. You can, vary that a little bit, but half an hour is probably a good amount of time. And you spend that time addressing the problems that you've had during the day in the same way that I was mentioning before. Now, 90% of those might be things that have already solved themselves by the time you get to your 5 o'clock session. You might find that, oh, all these things that were cluttering my mind during the day, I actually don't really even need to think about it. And I think that even that realization can help reduce the amount of time that you're worrying. Because once you know what those worries are that clutter your mind, that don't need to actually clutter your mind, the next time they come in, you'll recognize them and you'll be able to let them go because you're like, oh, that's one of those worries that I've always had that either never happens or it solves itself. So I actually don't really need to worry about that and you can just let it go. So I think that that's really helpful. But I think that the other thing that is really important to say, because this is a podcast for bipolar specifically. And I think that it's important to note that like the same person can experience really different types of worrying and overthinking depending on their mood state. So in depressive episodes, overthinking can often take the form of rumination. So repetitive kind of negative focus on past events often. Whereas in manic or hypomanic states, overthinking might feel more like racing thoughts, and they may not make as much sense, or they might be coming too fast to capture, um, and yeah, be harder to kind of control. And then obviously there are stable periods as well where those mood states aren't happening. And that's, I think, probably the best time to practice worry time is in those states because worry is still going to be present because it's always going to be present for all of us because it's, like I said before, it's functional and it needs to be there to keep us safe, but we can still have dysfunctional worry when we're stable. And that's a really good time to practice these kinds of strategies because when you kind of have that habit while you're feeling okay, when you're not feeling okay, it'll be easier for you to do that in a more significantly, say, depressed state or manic or hypomanic state. But also, you might need to alter how you do it in those states as well,
Yeah.
Yeah, and even, like, I often think, like, contain your brain is really helpful as a preventative tool because it can even help you identify if you are slipping into different mood states. If you're writing down more, thoughts about past events, for instance, you might say, "Oh, I'm ruminating a bit. That's, maybe a sign that I need to do something about becoming depressed," or if you're writing down thoughts that maybe are different in flavor or finding it really hard to capture your thoughts, and that might be a sign for you as well that to look after yourself and not slip into like a hypomanic or manic episode or get support for that if that's something that you can't always control. So it can be helpful for like prevention and early intervention. But one of the reasons I created Contain Your Brain was to help me with my own clients. So I really think it can be a helpful tool to use with your clinician or therapist if you've got someone that you see regularly to help you manage your psychological issues or bipolar disorder or any other psychological problem or disorder, where worry is a significant part of it, there are so many. Obviously all anxiety disorders, eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, bipolar 2, like they all have worry as a significant component. Then it's a really great tool to use with your therapist. And so that you can so you have a trusted person that can like also help you monitor what's going on with your thoughts and make sure that you're supported and in receiving the appropriate treatment or help to assist you.
Yeah, and I feel as you say, it's like we all have this window of opportunity where it's much easier to start a new routine and to start something new. And that's where we need to find the spot, because I know by a fact that the last time I was depressed was a few years ago, but I couldn't implement anything.
Uh-huh.
And if you are in this state, don't worry, I would say. It will get back and then you can work on it. But that's one of the things, like to not be feeling guilty. That's also one of the things which is quite hard. Sometimes we don't do the thing, but let's not push ourselves too much. How do you find the balance, actually? It's like, because being guilty is sometimes make it worse, because you know what you have to do, you don't do it, and then you feel even worse.
That's so true. I really think that self-judgment and self-criticism is at the root of a lot of maintenance of problems. Like we can't always control the problems that we have, right? If you have bipolar disorder, for instance, you don't have control over having bipolar disorder. But we do have some control over how much we maintain that problem, especially with this idea of judging ourselves, because we know that when we're depressed, like part of the syndrome of depression is low motivation, not liking, to do things that we normally like, having low energy, feeling really tired. Feeling guilty is part of it as well. Those are the symptoms of depression. So if we can actually know that those are the symptoms of depression and not necessarily, instead of attributing it to you as a person, that's how we kind of separate it. Because what judgment does and what guilt does is it keeps us stuck because it makes us feel worse, right? It keeps us stuck in that cycle of depression. So now you've got depression, you've got all the symptoms that are common to depression. And then you feel bad about yourself because you have those symptoms. And then feeling bad about yourself leads to you feeling worse about yourself. And then you've just entered the cycle. That's a cycle that's really hard to get out of. But what we could be doing is recognizing the signs of depression and saying to ourselves, well, it makes sense that I feel this way. It makes sense that it's really hard for me to do this strategy, even though I know the strategy is going to help me. I know that depression saps my motivation, and that's why it's really hard. And when we have that self-compassion and that kindness and that understanding with ourselves, we're actually in a position where we will feel a little bit better. And we're much more likely to do the things that are gonna help us, rather than the alternative, which is just taking us down a road that's just not helpful. And I think that really, I think with most of my clients, helping them with creating a non-judgmental stance and understanding that the experiences that they're having are because of the problem or the disorder that they have. And that's the function of that disorder. And so it is reasonable for them to feel that way, think that way, behave that way. That doesn't mean you want to stay there and keep doing those things, but like, let's start with, it makes sense. It makes sense that this is happening and this is how you feel and this is how you think and this is what you want to do or not want to do. Let's start with validating ourselves. And then when we do that, we make room for change, positive change.
Yeah, I think it's one of the toughest things, like to accept sometimes that it's tough,
Yeah,
but we're not responsible. Sometimes it's a chemical problem
that's
as
right.
for us as bipolar, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the most important things. We're running out of time, so I have one last question, Lillian.
Sure.
If you have a magic wand, what would you change in mental health?
What would I change in mental health? Wow, gosh, there's so many things. I think the most important thing is that people understand that we're all different and that we reduce the kind of stigma of mental illness, and that if I could change anything, it would be that everyone had access to the support and the resources and the strategies that they need. And not just that they need, but in the way that they need them. So everyone has a different preference. Everyone has a different learning style. Everyone has different needs and wants. And to have equity in mental health care, we really need to be able to provide what people actually need. And that might be one-on-one kind of services, or it might be group services, or it might be digital products, or it might be, audio, it might be video, it might be something written, um, that's kind of, I think, one of my main goals is really to create that variety, so that people can access resources based on what their actual needs and preferences and learning styles are. So if that was available to everyone, in the way that they needed it, and I think that would change the trajectory of mental health and mental illness for everybody.
Yeah, that's what we're doing a little bit with this podcast, is like to give you that, and then you can go further. I'll put the link, of course, of Contain Your Brain. And thanks a lot, Lillian, for your time.
Clement, thank you so much for having me. And I want to let people know Contain Your Brain is completely free, and we don't collect any of your data. So it's private, and it's one less thing that you have to worry about. And I really appreciate you having me on today. Thank you so much.
To learn more about bipolarity, go to our website, upstage.com, HOPESTAGE.com. See you soon.